All right, we're about to dive into one of the biggest, most debated questions in all of Christian theology. Seriously, this is a topic that has sparked endless arguments, shaped entire denominations, and has kept brilliant minds wrestling for centuries. And it all boils down to one really powerful question.
Yeah, this is the heart of it all. Is our salvation something we decide, a choice we make to follow God, or was it all set in motion by God Himself long before we ever took our first breath? Let's unpack the arguments for both sides, pulling them straight from the Scriptures. So, first up, let's explore the argument for what's often called predestination. This is a view that you'll hear associated with thinkers like John Calvin, and it puts the ultimate decision for salvation firmly and only in God's hands.
Okay, so the key thing to grasp here is the timing and, well, the one making the choice. According to this doctrine, the decision isn't made at some point during your life. Nope, it was made before the world was even a thing. And the one making that call? God, and God alone. See, the folks who hold this view would argue that because of our fallen human nature, we're just not capable of choosing God on our own. It's not in us. So if God didn't kick off the whole process and see it through, then nobody would get saved at all. For them, this idea actually brings a ton of comfort. It means salvation is secure, locked in by God's unchanging will.
This verse right here, from the book of Romans, is a huge piece of the puzzle for the predestination argument. It presents God's mercy not as something He owes us, but as His sovereign choice to make. It suggests that it's entirely up to God to decide. And then you've got this verse from Ephesians, which really doubles down on the idea. It flat out uses the words chosen us, and then nails down the timing, before the foundation of the world. For those who believe in predestination, this feels like incredibly strong evidence for a preordained plan. But, that's only one side of the biblical story.
Okay, so let's flip the coin and look at the other major perspective in this whole debate, the argument for free will. This viewpoint, which you might connect with theologians like Jacobus Arminius, really highlights our human responsibility in the salvation story.
So the core idea here is that God's offer of salvation is universal. It's on the table for every single person. But, and this is a big but, it's not automatic. It actually requires a personal response, a real decision from each and every one of us.
And this is a really powerful point, theologically speaking. The argument is, look, if humans were just programmed to love God, with no other option, would that love even be real? It would kind of make us little more than robots, right? True relationship, this view insists, has to involve the freedom to choose. And you can see how this belief fuels a really passionate drive for evangelism. I mean, take this verse from the Old Testament. It's a straight-up command. Joshua isn't saying, hey, go figure out if you've been chosen. No, he's putting the responsibility right on the people, giving them a clear choice and telling them to make a decision.
And then there's this one, maybe the most famous verse in the entire Bible. The key word here? Whosoever. That sounds like the invitation is open to literally anyone, right? The condition for salvation isn't some prior selection by God, but the act of believing, an action that a person has to take.
So, what do we do with this? We've got two ideas that seem to completely contradict each other, but both have strong support from the Bible. Well, a lot of theologians would say that maybe we're not supposed to solve it. Maybe we're just meant to live inside what they call a divine tension or a mystery.
And when you lay it all out like this, that tension becomes crystal clear. On one side, you have God's total power and divine choice. On the other, you have these very clear commands for us to respond, to make a decision. The Bible, amazingly, doesn't seem to have a problem presenting both of these as true, sometimes even in the same breath.
So the big takeaway here is that maybe it's not a contradiction we're supposed to fix. Maybe it's a paradox. One of those theological concepts where two things that seem like opposites are both true at the same time. For centuries, some of the smartest people have basically landed here. Our human minds might just not be big enough to fully get how God's total control and our real free choice can work together. So as we start to wrap this up, you can see this isn't really the end of the conversation. It's more like the beginning of your own thinking on it. The point of all this wasn't to hand you a neat and tidy answer, but to really lay out the pieces of this incredible theological puzzle. So, are we chosen or do we choose? Maybe the answer, in some divine way that's just too big for our brains to fully comprehend, is yes, both. The Bible seems to hold up God's absolute control, while at the same time treating us like free individuals who have to make a choice. And what does that mean for you and me? Well, that's the mystery that sits right at the very heart of faith.